is going to be recorded for registered participants to take a look at later. So anyway, this was a little bit strange. I'll be keeping an eye on the other link, making sure that people later on, if there's anybody there, that they will know where to go and so on. But in the meantime, we have to start our webinar in the site here. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. My name is Halldór Berg Harðarson, and I am here with Dr. Alvaro Castells. We are going to be doing the presentations here today for this first installment in the science communication training of EURAXESS in 2022. So I know that some of you already did this last year when we did these 5 trainings from last year, but this year there's going to be a little bit different style going on. And somebody asked for the live transcription. That's good. That's fine. But I think this is going to be a little bit different, and I think it's going to be super interesting and a lot of new value for those that are interested in seeing new ways to do science communication. But one of the things that I wanted to just encourage everybody to do is to join our science communication training WeChat group. So if you're interested in joining the group, we'll be following up on sort of all 5 trainings throughout the whole series of webinars on that WeChat group. And that's really nice. For example, if something like that, what happened right now, there was like some confusion with the links or whatever, it would be so much nicer if you're all in the same WeChat group and we can just fix it up right there. And if there's any questions or follow up and so on, you guys can take a look in the group. Last year, this was a really nice way to keep track of everything. Also, in particular, for those of you that are interested in finishing the whole course and getting the certificate at the end, you definitely need to be in the group. So feel free to scan the QR code. If the group goes over 100 people, I might need to put in the QR code again. So you just let me know if the QR code stopped working and we'll find out another way. But the code is going to come up in a second. First, what I wanted to talk about was a little bit is like, what is EURAXESS? For those of you that are not familiar with EURAXESS, I just want to introduce ourselves really quickly. EURAXESS China is an initiative of the European Commission of the European Union. So the European Commission has a ministry called Directorate General of Research, Innovation and Technology, RTD, and they run the EURAXESS mission all over the world to sort of strengthen the collaboration between European science and technology and other parts of the world, including China. And we have had an office here in Beijing since 2009, so it's already been 12 years. My name is Halldór Berg, and I've been the country representative since 2015, so already 7 years. And my colleague Anna is she's not here with us today, but she's going to be supporting the rest of it, the rest of the webinars. So she is also part of the EURAXESS China. And then we also have Vanessa Lee with us. I don't know if Vanessa is connected. Are you here, Vanessa?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Maybe you can introduce yourself really quickly.
Oh, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa. I'm supporting officer in Beijing for Heidelberg. Next, I'm gonna speak in Chinese. 谢谢大家来参加今天的培训。您后续有什么问题的话，可以在对话框里面用中文提出，我会为您翻译。您也可以直接写英文的问题。谢谢。Heidelberg, you can proceed.
Thank you. So like Vanessa just said, I'm sure most of you are going to be able to follow with us today. But if you have some very specific questions and so on, feel free to just ask Vanessa, and she can like communicate this really clearly to us. So that is there should be no reason not to ask. We hope that we'll get a lot of feedback from all of you and so on. So what does EURAXESS do? EURAXESS, in a nutshell, we animate a network to support researchers to help them to stay connected between China and Europe. So there's kind of 2 groups of people that we're working with. One of them is basically European researchers that are based here in China, which includes people like Alvaro, who's going to be speaking later. We have hundreds of European researchers that are here in China, and we want to support them and help them and work with them and make it easier for them to be here. But also the other group is Chinese researchers or other researchers that are based here in China and are interested in working with Europe or going to Europe or do things like that. So we can help them to find like funding opportunities or find partners in Europe and so on. Like we can also help them to connect with the services of EURAXESS, and we can also just kind of like help them to understand how the European research area works. So this is all sort of a part of that. We are a for free service, so like all of our webinars and everything is for free. And sometimes it's very serious stuff, like funding about Horizon Europe and some big new schemes and so on. But other times we're also trying to figure out like ways to do something that is kind of interesting and of value to you. And I think today's webinar is an example of that. Then just to explain a little bit bigger what Euraccess is, here in China, we have a Euraccess office since 2009. But Euraccess in China is a part of an initiative called Euraccess Worldwide. And we also have offices in a lot of other places. There are offices in Washington, DC, in America, or for example, in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, in Mexico, in Japan, in India, in Australia, all over the world, Singapore, and so on. So this is like our way to connect the wider research world to Europe. And then inside of Europe, we also have another sort of structure called Euraccess Service Centers, and there are more than 600 of them. So if you ever go to Europe, for example, you go to Germany or whatever, there's like 40 or 50 service centers there that are there to help researchers from outside of Europe or outside of that country to connect with the research landscape of that country. They're there to kind of give practical help, you know. Obviously, they're not here to help you out with your research. That's probably yourself or your institution's task, but they're there to make it more facilitate and make it more easy to be mobile researcher. Then we also have the Euraccess web portal, which is euraccess.org. You can find it there. And that has, for example, one of the biggest job database in the world for researchers, one of the biggest funding database in the world for researchers, and it's all for free and funded by the European Union. So that's pretty cool. Here in China, we do all kinds of different things. We'd help with people to find information, for example, about funding and how to work with Europe. We also do networking. So for example, the last time I met with Alvaro was, I think, for a researchers night in Guangzhou in November. That's an example where we're trying to create like an opportunity for Chinese and European researchers in different places in China to meet and maybe have a beer together and kind of connect with each other. Then we also have all kinds of different events that we do, for example, the Forum for European Researchers in China and the European Research Day and different things like that. And then we also hold webinars like the thing that we're doing right now. And just examples of webinars that we've been doing for the last year or so, we help people to find out like information about individual European countries. We did, for example, a webinar last year about a research opportunity in Spain. So it's not only about the European Union, we also help people to figure out like if they're interested in something particular, how to do a PhD in the Netherlands, for example, something like that. We do the science communication training we're doing right now. I did like a webinar last week on funding in Horizon Europe. We do regular webinars on the European Research Council, the Marie Curie Fellowship, and so on. And when it comes to like physical events, we try to do as much of them as we can, like the researchers' nights I just mentioned, or the forums, or information sessions and funding trainings and so on. But obviously these days we're not doing any of them. I had to cancel a lot of them because of COVID, but we try our best to be there for you when we can. So that is enough of Euraccess. This is not a webinar about Euraccess. This is this first science communication training of a series of 5 trainings that we are planning. And I just really wanted quickly to take a look at what we can expect. There is going to be a webinar today where we're going to be sort of handling the basics of science communication. And I'll be here with Dr. Alvaro Castells, who is going to I'll be introducing in a moment. And then next week, Wednesday, March 30th, we're going to be the second webinar where we're going to help people to learn how to prepare for a job interview. We have this amazing trainer that has worked with Euraccess for more than 7 years, Dean Hokan, who is going to be doing like a whole training about how to do job interviews. Not only job interviews, like any kind of interview actually. Like there's all kinds of situation for a researcher where you might need to stand in front of a panel and explain yourself and kind of communicate your ideas, evaluation panels. And if you're applying for funding, if you're doing the ERC, for example, the European Research Council, if you're successful, you will be invited to meet for an interview as well. So this is something that happens all the time. The inspiration for this came when I was talking to one of our members like a month ago. She had been successfully invited for an interview for a Chevening fellowship. And she's like, how do I do the interview? And I was like, yeah, I mean, like, that's a good question. It's actually a really important part of being a researcher to know how to do that. So I think this is something we did not do last year. So I think this is a really nice little addition. Then the third webinar is on how to publish in academic journals. And we were so lucky that some of our colleagues, they put us in contact with Taylor and Francis, which is the one of the biggest publishing house in the world, like scientific publisher in the world. They have all of these different journals, and they run this book publishing and so on. And I think maybe most of you should be aware of who they are. And they have this trainer, Victoria Babbitt, who's been working with some of my colleagues and doing this kind of webinar before, helping researchers to figure out how to get published in academic journal. And I was thinking, like, first thing that came to my mind is like, this is really important part of communication when you're a researcher. Some might argue probably the most important part for a researcher. You know, like if you don't get published, you're not gonna have a career, right? That's basically it. And it requires certain types of communication skills, because there's one thing to be good, have like really good research, and sometimes the results, they speak for themselves, but there's also definitely a trick to how to get published. So why not get the information directly from those that are in charge of these journals and so on, and hear if they have any good tips and tricks, etc. That's the third one. But then we come to the fourth and fifth one. This year's science communication training is not only being organized by Euraccess, we're actually doing it in cooperation with the DAD, the German Academic Exchange Center here in China. So they do organize the Falling Walls lab, which is this pitch competition for researchers and scientists that want to explain what they do, what kind of research they do in less than 3 minutes. And they've been doing it for several years here in China. And the winner gets to participate in the Falling Wall final event in Berlin every year. And it's like one of the most prestigious science communication events in the world. And there's one in Beijing, and there's another one in Shanghai. And they just have all this experience working with working with something like that. So we thought it would be really cool to do something together. And in that vein, they've prepared for us like this training on how to do these kind of short pitches. And they will have Corinna Luther, who's the head of the lab for Falling Walls. And she's going to be like the Falling Wall organization in Germany. So, you know, you could hardly get a better trainer for that. And here on the Chinese side, they also got from the SAP labs, which they have like a entity called China Digital School. There's this trainer called Bill Xu, who is also going to be helping us out with this. So this is going to be a super cool thing that is going to be coming up. And I think you can actually learn a lot from that as well. So this is what we're looking at. And for those of you that are participating in this, you can get certified for participation. So like if you participate in at least one of the training session, you are able to get like a silver certificate. And this is similar to the way that we were doing this last year. But if you do more than 3 of them, you can get like a gold certification. So like this, basically we want to kind of like encourage people to do more than just one of them, come to as many of them as possible. And then we have a final certification that we call the diamond certification, where basically you do all of the trainings. And then at the end, you send us a video with your example of your science communication, just a few minutes, like 2-3 minutes. And we will give you some feedback on that. And this is going to be like the final assignment. And if you do this, you get like a diamond certification from us. And it just certifies that you did the whole course, and you'll also did this final assignment. So for those of you that want to participate in this and get the certified that you did this whole thing, I again encourage you to scan the QR code and join the WeChat and the WeChat group, because we will then ask you to confirm that you came here today. The problem is that we will have like a list of everybody that came to the Zoom, but sometimes it's not the same name as the name that you registered under. So we might need to confirm with you who is who and whatever. So if you want the certificate, you need to be in the WeChat group so we can kind of confirm all of that and make sure you'll get this. All right. So that is it for the format of the whole thing. Like I said, this is the second time that we do this kind of science communication training. Last year in 2021, we did a 5 webinar series as well around the same time in March and April. The first one was done by me and Anna, where we talked about the advantages of science communication in general. Then we talked about communication skills that you need on a stage, where we got a Chinese colleague who is really, really good and trained by the Chinese Academy of Sciences here to do that sort of thing. That was also really well received. Then we had like a European trainer that came to help us to teach people how to do creative pitches and how to get people interested in your research. We also had, back then, we had like a training on online communication to international audience. So the big thing that we were thinking about then, we had COVID was such a big issue, and it still is. And everybody were doing these sort of Zoom meetings and all this different online communication. And we decided to have like a whole webinar about how to do that sort of outreach. And then the final one we were with Dr. Chong, who was the winner of the Science Slam before that. He came and also shared with us some of the tips and tricks that he had been doing, and how he did his science communication. And you can see that there's some overlap here. Some of this is similar to what we're doing this year, but not so much. There's actually a lot of things from last year that is not going to be this year. And for those of you that did get our diamond certificate last year and you do the whole thing this year, we will basically give you the advanced certification, because we want to acknowledge the fact that you are able to like learn all these different skills and follow all these different things. If you are coming to this for the first time and you did not participate last year, you can see that we recorded all of it and it's available online on our website. And if you will get like, I will be sharing my presentation afterward in the WeChat group, the PPT, and there's a link to all the videos. So you can click it and you'll be able to see it. So that is kind of my tip to you. Just go look at our videos for last year. I'm not a big believer in repeating this kind of stuff. I would rather get to some things that we never heard before and so on. But I decided to give like maybe a little bit of an overview of things that we were talking about in the first presentation, the first webinar of last year. And just to sort of set the tone for why we are doing this and why science communication is important. So 5 reasons why the science communication is good for your career. And we kind of split it up into 5 different reasons. If you are not sure why you should be participating in this kind of a webinar, I think there's actually a lot of really good reasons. And I think it kind of, you can start just like really close to heart, actually. You can think about how important it is to your career to be able to effectively influence and communicate with the people around you in your own institution. We all know that when you are developing your career as a researcher, your role in your faculty, your relationship with your institutional supervisors and people that are decision makers around you is probably gonna make or break how successful you are going to be and what kind of research you'll be able to do and what you can do. So this is, if nothing else, there are some tips here today that and in this whole thing that will help you to sort of manage these small things that are so important for your career. Then if we go a little bit wider, clearly a researcher's career is also really dependent on how you will do, sort of what is going to be your reputation in your like wider field, right? So we all know that your success when it comes to academic achievements and so on has a lot to do with how you are perceived by your colleagues in your own field around the world. And this is part of your job as well. And you should never forget about that. You are, at least in a normal year, you have to be making sure you're going to all these different conferences, you're networking with other researchers that are doing similar things as you and so on. This is just part of what it means to be a scientist. And this also requires communication skills. The idea that comes particular in my mind is like this, let's say a researcher from university in Shanghai or something, he is sent to Portugal to go to a scientific conference, and he gets like 10 minutes to introduce the research that his Shanghai institution is doing. And this is just such an important 10 minutes. You stand up there and you have to tell them, like what you're up to and whatever. I mean, like this can really make a lot of difference in how you're going to be perceived and if your work is going to get attention and so on. So this is also very important. Then we get into the sort of the field of wider policy and wider society. And this is probably where we think about science communication. Could somebody stop their mic? Yeah, that's good, thank you. I don't know what that was. So yeah, a lot of time when people think about science communication, they think about something like, you know, like talking in front of millions of people, somebody like, I don't know, like Neil deGrasse Tyson talking on the TV and so on. And this is definitely a really important part of a scientist's job. After all, normally science is funded by public money, and you might be doing something very specific and special, and you might be like in the field of science that you know is really important, but there's no guarantee that society will value it. And there's nobody that's going to be fighting for this except for yourself. So you have responsibility as a scientist to convince the wider society. Then this also connects to the next point. Another reason you want to get the public to be on your side. In the end, it's the whole society, it's the public that decides the value of science and so on. And you might want to make sure that people understand why what you do is important and why we need to be doing it. And then finally, I think a lot of sort of pure scientists at heart, they get into this because they have this joy of discovering things and so on, and learning new facts about the universe. And I think that really frequently connects with this joy of sharing what you just learned. You know something that other people don't know. You understand something that you think is really fascinating, and you just want to be able to share that. That's like, I think, a fundamental urge I think a lot of people have. And that's also one other reason why it's good to be good at this. So if you want to see our collection of tips and tricks when it comes to communication, you can take a look at our recording from last year. One of the things that I talked a lot about last year was about deliberate practice. Nobody is good at communicating at the beginning. You have to practice this. You have to do it often, and you'll be better at this. And there's a lot of science actually to how to practice in a good way. And I'm only going to remind you of one fact here. You're not really practicing well unless there's some kind of feedback built into your practice. So a good idea, whenever you're trying to practice something, is maybe recording yourself or asking somebody to give you feedback afterward or something. Because if you don't have a feedback loop into your practice, if you're practicing without getting any feedback, you're not learning, basically. That's what's wrong. So that's just like a quick reminder how we get better at anything, basically. But this also really applies to communication. I mean, like, you need to find these opportunities to come up and communicate, and you should also take advantage of those opportunities to get better. Then I am a big believer in sort of showing passion when you're communicating. I really feel like you should let your enthusiasm shine through when you're doing communication. That is the way to get people's attention, and this should not be really difficult. You don't need to fake that, because you're literally talking about one of the most important things in your life, which is your career and the things that you're working on and so on. And just don't make it dry. There's no reason to. You do care about this, and let people hear that you care. And another tip is to get people's attention early. Start with some strong way to communicate. I actually am realizing right now I did not really do that today, so sorry about that. But a good idea, so for example, is to start with a story or something that will gets people imagination. That's like a really well-known communicative trick. The fourth trick here is to keep it simple. The KISS, the KISS recommendation, or keep it simple, stupid. This is always a good idea, but I think this is something that researchers in particular might think about, because I would say 50% of the time, this is the problem for researchers. They come up to the States and they start talking about all the technical details and so on, because this is what you've been trained in. You're really good in all the techniques and the details and the data and everything, but that's probably not the best way to communicate it to like wider audience, right? You might want to figure out how you can keep it more simple and simplify it. And the fifth trick here is from my side is try to tap into who you are. So like people sometimes go into a character when they're on stage, and you can also try to do something of that. But when I say be yourself, what I mean is that people, they really appreciate it when they see that people are being truthful and are kind of like sharing their identity and so on. A lot of you that are here today, for example, are Chinese. If you're speaking in front of a European audience, that is like, just take advantage of that, and like don't be hiding that where you come from, and just, for example, start by sharing where you're from and how you do, like who you are and so on, because this is something that like people can connect with. My main point is, like, I feel like it's really common here that people want to put on a mask, and that's probably not the best way to really connect with people. The truth always shines through when you hear people speaking. You can hear same people like pretending, like getting themselves into character and whatever. But as soon as you hear somebody just kind of saying something that he really believe in, and it really reflects who he is, everybody understands it, everybody sees it. It's really interesting and it's really powerful. And then the final thing that you might want to take a look at our last year's presentation about is how to spruce up your slides. There's a lot of ways to make your PowerPoint better looking, and the visuals and so on. So like you might like think about how you can make your visuals good looking and so on. There's a lot of tips and tricks to do this in a really easy way. I'm not going to get into it. Just remember, the slides are not the center stage. That's not the most important thing that you're doing. They should always be on the side a little bit. That's also why I don't really like how Zoom works, because it always puts the slide as full screen and then you're like a tiny head in the corner. It really shouldn't be like that. We cannot control this. In general, you are like what you're saying is the most important thing, and the slide should be supporting that. I don't want to spend way too much time on this. I'm going to go over how preparing, what people can prepare effectively, and then I'm going to leave the stage to Alvaro. And so basically, I think you can like start before, if you have this yours. Oh wow, sorry, there's something broke on my chair. That was unexpected. Anyway, so if you are facing the prospect of going into a presentation soon that you're a little bit nervous about and you want to do well, I would say the first step that you should like thinking about is asking yourself the main questions of what is your goal and what is like important, and like what is the thing you want to sort of communicate. And the thing that you should be looking at is like what in like the whole, let's say that you're like introducing, for example, your main research area, like the thing that you've been researching for the last 3 years. You should like look at that and try to understand what is important here. What are the things that really need to be understood, what don't need to be understood, etc. Then the next step is just practicing for this. And I really recommend that you don't like take the route or the method of reading your material, like writing it all down and reading. That's probably not the best way. Instead of like memorizing your speech, it's better to be a little bit more natural and etc. But what you can do is that you can kind of like decide beforehand what are going to be your key points. They can be sort of your guiding light throughout this, and you can even train yourself on like what words you want to use, what expressions you want to use, and so on. But then when it comes to it, you should try to use your own voice and just like speak and like talk about it. You could think a little bit about it like if you were suddenly standing in a party and you're discussing with a colleague about a topic. You will not like take up some like flashcards and start reading this. You would basically just start thinking about it. You'll structure what you want to say in your mind, and then you will start communicating this. And this is the true talent that you want to be able to develop. And then basically you have the main points, and you will just have to kind of follow them. And when you get lost and you kind of don't know what to do next, you just remember, oh, this is the next point. Just actually like I'm doing right now. I structured this slide as 3 points. And when I got lost in the middle of it, I was like, oh, and the third point is this. And I was like, okay, I can just go to that. And that will help me to continue what I'm trying to say. I am not going to be spending more energy on explaining this to you, because we are really lucky to have with us an excellent trainer here today that has a good track record as a science communicator. And I saw his presentation beforehand, so I know it's going to be pretty cool. I just wanted to like really quickly before we start that, I want to talk about opportunities to do these kind of presentations. So we have different science communication competitions in China. There are Chinese ones, but the ones that I want to mention now are a couple of European ones that are also here in China and open for China-based researchers. This is an excellent motivator for you to participate in, so and sort of develop your science communication skills for free, and even with the opportunity to even get some nice prizes and so on if you do really well. And the first one I want to discuss is the Falling Walls. They have this Falling Walls labs in Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing every year right now. And the winner there gets to go to the Falling Walls lab in Germany, in Berlin. And it's like these 3 minutes pitches. Normally there's like maybe 20 people that come in and they talk in front of audience. They have like a really strict clock. It's like elevator pitches. They need to like convince you that this is really interesting. And then there's like a jury. They will ask you questions afterward, and the jury will pick the top winners, and the best winner will be sent to the final competition in Germany. So this is super cool. And we are working with the DAAD on the science communication training. So you should definitely consider joining this. And we'll be talking more about this in our 4th and 5th webinar of the Science Communication Training Series later in April. And we will also go into the details how you can do exactly this type of communication well. And I think it actually translates really well into other type of communication, because, and there's one thing to speak for like 20 minutes, it's a different thing to do it for 10 minutes. But doing it for 3 minutes is like a really specific skill that is actually very useful. We call it like an elevator pitch, because basically a lot of the times you have a good idea, you don't get a lot of time. You need to be able to convince somebody. Maybe you'll get like that one moment in the elevator where you actually get the access to the person you want to be able to speak to. And the person will ask you, so what do you do? And now you have to be able to say exactly, really effectively, the things that you want to be able to say. So, and this is a skill on its own. And we have this competition where you can do this. But then we also have the EUREX's Science Slam, which we've been doing now for 6 times already since 2014. And a Science Slam is a 10-minute scientific talk where the researcher is competing to present their work in front of a non-expert audience. So this is like helping you guys to learn how to speak in front of people that are not researchers, or maybe at least not researchers in your field. And this is a super cool competition. I'm really proud of this because this is our thing. This is what EUREX has developed. And I've been doing this for many years now. I've done like 4 of them. And you can find everything about them at scienceslamchina.com. Basically, a Science Slam is like a scientific talk. You compete with other scientists to try to do the most interesting research presentation. And you're supposed to be showing the fascinating side of your research. So it's not necessarily about figuring out the best data or something like that, but like you're trying to communicate really effectively to non-expert audience. And it's normally like that we have like semifinals where people send in videos and so on, and then we pick the finalists and we hold the finals in Beijing. This, of course, we did this in 2021 in December, and we were not able to hold it physically in Beijing that year because of the COVID restrictions, but we did have like a virtual event where we had an audience on site. No, sorry, we had a jury on site. We even had like a little bit of virtual reality component, trying our best to give the feeling of actually being on stage and speaking in front of people and so on. So we are really trying hard to make this work. We are planning to do a Science Slam again this year in December 2022. Hopefully we'll be able to do a big event and invite everybody to come and so on. That would be really, really great. And it's open to anybody that is doing research here in China. It doesn't matter what field of research you're in or what your nationality. And it also doesn't matter what is your research career stage. We have had people winning that were PhD students, also people that were professors, and people that were like even a little bit more higher level. So this is just for anybody that is a scientist and wants to show off how good they are at communication. And normally people win like a trip to Europe. That is like the traditional prize for winning the Science Slam. But clearly this year we did not prize that win. That was not a possibility. Whether nobody's flying anywhere at the moment. So we find some other prize instead. And we'll see what the prize is going to be this year. Hopefully it's going to be something good. And yeah, that's it. The previous winners of Science Slams can be seen here. We have 6 of them already throughout the years. And normally, like we have 4 of them that were Chinese. And we also have Dr. Vikas Malik, who was like this Indian researcher here, who did really well in 2016, if I remember correctly. And last year, we actually had a Spanish researcher that won, and that is the person that is going to be helping me out with today's training, Dr. Alvaro Castells. And I thought that was a really nice bridge to sort of introduce him. I think maybe instead of me introducing you in something long, maybe Alvaro, maybe you can introduce yourself and then start your presentation.
Yeah, the first 2 slides are a little bit about myself, so I might as well give the presentation. Nevertheless, thanks a lot for your very nice introduction. You flatter me. Okay, I'm going to try to share the screen. Which I cannot now. Let's see. Okay, please tell me if you see the presentation.
I can see it really clearly.
Okay, perfect. So, well, let's begin. Thanks a lot for coming here today, and thanks a lot to Haldor and for Euraccess for for inviting me for coming here. As he has said, I'm Alvaro Castells, an associate researcher here in China for like 2 years now. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the very basics of science communication. I'm going to try to make this easy to hear, easy to understand. Science communication, one of the main objectives of this is to make things entertaining. So I think I would be a very bad science communicator if I made this boring. So I'm going to try to keep it as light as possible and useful. Some of the things have already been mentioned by Haldor. So for this, I'm going to try to go a little bit faster so you don't hear 2 times the same. That can get a little bit boring. But let's see. Okay, so very brief. I'm a biochemist. I did a PhD in Spain, and I work in what is called chromatin architecture and super resolution microscopy. And now I have done one of the first mistakes, one of the cardinal sins of science communication that I will talk about afterwards, but just for you to keep that in mind. And basically for the last 2 years, I've been working here in China, in Guangzhou, in the Bioland laboratory, together with the GIB8, which is the Guangzhou Institute of Biomedicine and Health, which is dependent on CAS. And we have been like a small lab, 10 people here. And yes, this would be my academic background, but one of my passions is science communication. I have participated many times in different events. I was the winner this year of the Science Slam, but I also classified for the research in 4 minutes. So I just now have to shave 1 minute off to be able to present to the research in 3 minutes that Haldor was talking. And I've been also on the other side organizing for several years in Spain the Pint of Science. So just now that we're talking about this, if you are interested in this, Pint of Science is an organization that organizes talks about outreach, science in a lot of different topics. It's a worldwide organization. It's for 1 week, normally around May, in which you can go, have a beer, and hear to some very nice people talking about their passion, about their research, etc. So these kind of things happen, these kind of things exist, and it's very, very nice that they exist. But now I'm going to begin, before going to tips and tricks, etc. I'm going to talk a little bit. You're going to indulge myself to talk a little bit about science communication. I'm going to try to convince you that we are living in what I would call the golden age of science communication. Science communication can be used for, can be referred to a whole lot of topics. I'm going to take like the biggest and wider possible explanation for this, which goes from elevator pitch for a project to, but also to like outreach and science communication to the layman. So for a lot of time, from like, if we go 20, 30 years ago, there was not as much importance given to science communication and is given today. And there were some like worldwide phenomena, but in general, they had like a couple of characteristics, which is that they had a generalist target. So they were like for the layman, and they didn't assume any previous knowledge. They were few, but normally they had big budget, and they were like team efforts. And they use what I would say a big questions approach. So if I can only do one program which is about astronomy, I'm going to try to answer the big questions about astronomy to make people see which are like the big questions in biology. And that was more or less the norm for several years, until what I would call like the big game changer that we had, that were the TED Talks. Most people here are probably know what TED Talks are. They are like short form talks in which scientists normally go and talk about a wide variety of topics. And now we give them a little bit by granted, but if you go 10, 15 years ago, they were a really, really, really big game changer. They still had a generalist target, but suddenly they had like a broader range of topics. They tended to be more short form, and they began to introduce one important thing that Haldo was talking, is that they centered a lot of times on a personal experience. Like the scientists were explaining the research, but they were contextualizing the research on his personal experience. And suddenly you got more and more specialized topics. From there on, now we are what I would call the golden age of scientific communication. Nowadays, there's tons, thousands of very clever people, very good communicators, working in both generalist and specific topics. And suddenly we have like a huge range of things to choose, from very short 3 minutes, I'm going to explain you this in 3 minutes, to a 3-hour podcast of somebody explaining you the whole collapse of the Assyrian Empire. Now they still are a personal project, because most of these efforts are like from very small teams or even single creators. And this is the demonstration of how one passionate person with a single vision can do way more nowadays that a BBC documentary could do 20 years ago. So now, from this we get to what I would call the information paradox. Information has never been more easily reachable in the history of humanity, but there has never been so much misinformation around. So this is very silly. This is not any particular scientific proof, but if I just put in Google heliocentric model, I get 2.5 million hits. If I put flat Earth, I still have the same. I still have 2.5 million hits. So what I'm going to this is that we have, ironically, we are at a point in history in which information has never been more easily accessible and easily understandable, but there's never been so much misinformation about. So I think that's where one of the big things, one of the big roles of science communication has to be. Like nowadays, I think like many of the scientists that are here or the people that are aiming for a scientific area receive money actually from the government. So you could think of ourselves as public servants. So I think that there has to be an obligation from our side to try to bring the truth. So for me, the communication has to have 4 main points. It has to be truthful, which is self-evident, but we have to remember this. It has to be easy to access. If you are super good at communicating, but nobody can hear you or can listen to you, then you are just preaching to an empty room. One thing that I think it's important is we have to try not to be elitist. It's very common for a lot of scientists to think of themselves, I'm very clever, my topic is the most difficult topic on the world, I'm so good for understanding this. And I think that's an error, that's a mistake, because that mystifies sciences. We need to try to make things simple. We need to try to make things that people can read them. Like we don't have to tell, oh, this is so complicated. We have to tell people, no, this is easy. Let me explain it to you. And this, of course, goes into the last point. The communication has to be understandable. And this is the most important at the end. If you mess this up, you are like, it's useless what you're trying to do. So now that I've done this kind of proselytizing, let's talk a little bit about tips and tricks, basic tricks for science communication. So Haldor has already introduced this, but this is the one I'm going to spend the longest on, because I feel that this is the one that we as scientists fail more often, which is adequation of the message. We need to always, the first step when you're trying to decide what you're going to tell is to say, who am I telling it for? You have to adapt the message to the type of public. You have to understand what your public knows. And unless you're absolutely 100% sure, you need not to assume any previous knowledge. This, ironically, the more experienced a researcher is, the more he knows about the topic, it's something that we fail the most. Because suddenly what you're working in, you have been working for 20 years, it's second nature for you, it's so obvious to you. And you tend to forget that things that are obvious to you, people do not know. So what's the first thing that I have said today? I work in chromatin architecture and super resolution microscopy. Maybe some people here know what this is, but most people here, for them, it would have been the same if I had said, I work in blah, 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 blah. Like, it makes no sense for most people. So that was useless. I just spent 20 seconds in a useless bit. So what I want to say with this is, for example, I work in biology. If I was working, talking about RNA polymerase, if I want to introduce the concept of phosphorylation of RNA polymerase, and I wanted to talk with somebody about this, if it's somebody from my lab, I can begin there. But you have to think, you have to go before that. If I talk about RNA polymerase, I need to introduce what's RNA, I need to introduce what's DNA, I need to introduce what is the nucleus, and sometimes, if for example you're working with children, you need to introduce what a cell is. And this is the most common mistake. And I know that I'm going one and again and again and again, but I'm very tired of hearing very, very, very good scientists that talk to a common public and begin to talk about Western blots or about string theory or about things in which you have lost people in the first 5 minutes. And then what you're doing is basically hearing yourself talk. So Haldor calls it KISS. I call it explain it to your grandma. Okay, so it's always good to do a kind of exercise in which, okay, if I told this to my grandma, would she understand this? If the answer is no, then you're doing something wrong. You need to introduce every concept that you're going to be using, you need to introduce it beforehand. And you need to try to minimize the amount of difficult and technical concepts. Trim and focus. That does not mean that you cannot introduce difficult concepts. In fact, your main duty is to try to make a difficult concept easy and to try to, that the person that leaves your talk have at least a layman knowledge of this difficult concept. But the thing is that it's way better if you introduce two very good scientific and difficult and technical concepts that if you mention 10 and people don't understand them. So try to focus your attention. And this is also very dependent on how long your presentation is going to be. If you have 1 hour, you can take 20 minutes to explain what a cell is, what is the nucleus, what's the DNA, and then once you have paved your way, you can begin to talk about really complicated stuff. But most times you're not going to have this long of a time. You're only going to have like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. So try to focus, try to trim. You don't want to impress people. Your objective is not that people say, oh my God, this person has said so many difficult things. Your objective is to make people understand what you want for them to, for you are doing or what you're researching or a difficult scientific topic. One very good technique for this is the narrative approach. we are hardwired to like listening stories, and we hate hearing lists. Like nothing can be as boring as like one list of topic A, topic B, topic C, topic D. Like you do that, and it is very useful, like to give like a lot of information. And if you're in a classroom, if you're a teacher, it's normal for you to do that. But if you're using a list, if you're not using something, if you're using something that is boring, you're going to make people lose your interest. So people love hearing stories. So what I'm going here is that you can use narrative tools for that. For example, if I was talking about making people understand how is our actual model of the atom, I could go on to what people wanted, what people knew, what people thought, that would be set up, what was the experiment that made people realize that this is not working, that would be the confrontation, which is the new way of understanding the atom, that would be the resolution. So like we're hardwired for like beginning, middle, end. We're hardwired for this. So the narrative approach can be your personal experience. I began to work on this was not working, then I did this, and then I discovered this. This is way more interesting to people than if you begin, okay, this is how the situation is right now. So there's why it's also good to attach personal value to it. So talking about narrative approach and narrative language, you probably will be using comparisons and metaphors. And this is something which is vital. You cannot go really hard on that, and you're going to have to use metaphors for people to understand what you mean. But there is something, and this is like one concept that I have kind of invented, okay? This is not like a formal thing, but this is what I call the metaphor trap. Using metaphors makes things easier and simpler to understand, but also makes things get away from reality. So sometimes, and a lot of times, what you need is to strike a balance between the two of them. I'm going to use an example here. This is about how the coronavirus goes inside of the cell. So if we get rid of any kind of metaphor and we go to the hard data, this is the most truthful approach to what is really happening. Please allow me to read this for a moment. An envelope anchors K protein mediates coronavirus entry into host cells by first binding to a host receptor and then fusing viral and host membrane cell from receptor binding of SARS-CoV. Everybody, you have lost everyone. You have lost everyone there. People, like, even if this is correct, people are absolutely zoned out. You can go all to the other way. And you can try to do a metaphor. And I see this sometimes with people that try to make stories. And this is nice, but it's quite dangerous. Because I can be talking to children. So the fox wants to go inside the hen house. And he has a special key that opens one of the doors. And because you know that I'm talking about coronavirus, you're kind of getting it. But if somebody doesn't have the previous knowledge, it can be a nice story, but they also won't really understand what you're talking about. So I'm not saying this is perfect by all means, but I try to do a compromise, no? So for example, what I would say if I was talking with somebody is the virus entering the cell is directed by the binding of one small part on the surface of the virus to a protein, which is in the surface of the cell. You can think of it as a kind of handshake. If you can do it, if you know how to do the handshake, you will be granted access inside the cell. Is it completely truthful? No, this one is more truthful. Is it easier to understand? Yes. So you need to strike a balance without getting completely lost in the metaphor. And one really nice way to use these metaphors is what I call anchoring the information. People are more interested in their day-to-day life. It's difficult for people to think in abstracts, to think of things that are not related to them. So if you relate what you are doing or what your research is with personal experience, it's way easier for them to be interested. That's why it's kind of easy to talk about things such as cancer, because like people can think about that. But it's more difficult to talk about evolution of the turtle's shell, because the people may think, what's in it for me? Oh, this is so far from what they do that they don't understand how this can be relevant for them. And sometimes can be really relevant. For example, this is something that I've used many times. I work into a structure of the DNA and how the DNA wraps around what we call histones. So if I talk to somebody that doesn't know this, the DNA is wrapped around histones, people do not have or do not really are going to understand what I'm talking about. But if I first say, look, the DNA, it works like a thread. It literally is like a thread. Physically, it behaves like it. And the cell needs to organize this structure. So what do we normally use to organize threads in our home? We use bobs, or thread bobbins. So histones literally work as bobbins, and is the way that our cell has to structure and organize the DNA. Suddenly I have made maybe something which is very far away from like the common experience of the person more easily understandable. Science is not something that only happens in the lab. It's something that happens every day, all around us. So if you can relate what you do to the personal experience of the people and tell them why it's important to them, or even tell them why this is fascinating, or how this is similar to something of their common day-to-day life, this will anchor information. They will maybe not remember histones, but they will remember, oh yeah, like the DNA is wrapped around something, and that's enough sometimes. So all of these were like the most important things. And let's remember, because this is something that I say the most often, the importance of the adequation of the information. Now, once you have decided more or less what you want to tell, how you want to tell them, you also have to think about what's going to be your style. This is something that Haldor has already been introduced. He's like a really, he prefers like the personal experience style. And I think that's one of the ones that can work the best, because we'll make people more engaged on it. But there are like many different styles that you can use, and they will depend on what's your public, what is your main objective. Are you working for like colleagues? Is like for children? Is it for like people that are really interested in science, or people that are not necessarily interested in science? So at the end, this is not that important. You can think of it as the spice. It's not necessarily nutritious, but it can make the story more appealing. So I'm going to give some examples of like types of the styles that I have seen. This is not by all means a comprehensive list, but it's just for you to think, oh, okay, yes, all of these people are communicators, but they use many different styles. And I also want this to be an exercise for you to think, what is my style? What do I do? Where do I feel comfortable with? So the most common traditional style would be the professional. Like that's the one that normally scientists fall into the easiest, because the one you've seen the most, and is the one that you will use when you talk with colleagues. And it can be really useful. This is the vanilla flavor, has nothing going on, but it does the job done. There's also the showmans. Like normally this is like for professional communicators, they normally have bigger budgets. Most of you can know this guy has been doing this for 30 years. And if people remember him and you see this, even if you don't know the name, which is Bill Nye, by the way, you'll say, oh yeah, I kind of remember him. I've seen some YouTube videos. Why? Because they are communicating, but also putting up a show. And that's sometimes that makes people remember what they say. The passionate. This is one that was not that common some time ago, but it has become more and more common. And that's a lot of what the TED Talks for. It's like somebody which is really knowledgeable in the topic, but it's not really that they have knowledge in the topic, it's that have emotional stakes in the topic. This can be really powerful, because if you make people connect with your emotional stake on this, people are going to engage more with you, people are going to put in your shoes, and it's going to be easier for people to remember what you're going to try to tell them. The comic. This can be one of the most useful and the most difficult to do, because being good in science doesn't mean that you're good at making jokes. But like for the people that manage to do that, they have half of the job done. Because if you can make the people laugh, they're going to remember that for a long time, and they're going like probably be very, very engaged. And your next door neighbor is something that we have seen a lot now with a lot of YouTubers that is like, okay, let's sit down. I'm going to, during the next 2 hours, I'm going to explain to you how we discover exoplanets. And they make one topic that may be very hard to understand. They make it so it's less aggressive, it's less intimidating. So that doesn't mean that you have to choose one of those, but it's just like food for thought. Think about which different styles, think what is the one you like, think one is the one that would make your presentation shine the most. Now let's talk about one particular topic that some people like a lot, some people hate it, which is public participation. So in many ways, most of the types of science communication are passive endeavors. I give you my information and you receive it. But humans like to do things. So if you manage to make people engage on it in a different way, actively, it's going to be easier for like the message to reach. You can, and this depends a lot on the format that you're using. It goes better with long formats. If you're capable of doing a Q&A after what you do, or a debate, or maybe even like engage some people on the public, it's going to be better for people. The problem with this is this very difficult to pull out when you have time-limited events. So if you have 10 minutes and then you have something with the public, but the public is not understanding what you want to do, or it's not answering how you want, you may have like a very big problem. So this is very interesting, but you need to have flexibility and improvisation, because once you have your plan, then you go with the public and it doesn't work how you expect. So you need to be confident with what you do. Public participation and the multimedia approach. This goes hand in hand with what I said before. Let's, for example, suppose that we have to tell some children what's an atom. And to one person, we give a very dry, bare bones definition. And to the other, a computer model of how an atom works and how the electron works around in the atom. The more senses that we're engaging, the easier it's going to be for the people to retain the information. You need to combine images, you need to combine sounds, maybe even tactile approaches if you're working in person with the people. And one thing that lately we have been seeing more and more being used is props. For example, for my presentation, I used like a small microscope that I did and some like Play-Doh things. And they are catching, they are different, they can be very interesting, but it's the same as in the metaphor. They have to be a tool, not the main attraction, because otherwise, like, people will remember, oh, I saw this thing with lights that blink, but they will forget and zone out of what you're saying. Also, you have to remember that the whole body is your tool. That you have to have, like, the body language is a difficult thing, and in general scientists, we don't tend to work on it a lot, but it's good for engaged people. If you're like this, close, in the States, without moving, it's easier for like losing the attention of people that if they are, if you're moving a little bit, engaging people, etc. That's where, like, also as Haldor was mentioning, if you're in a Zoom call, it's more difficult, because if I do this, my hand is going out of frame and it's useless. So, and then some rapid fire tips and tricks, okay? Your voice. A lot of people think about what they say, but I get the feeling a lot of times that people don't think about how they are going to say it. You can play with volume, you can play with how you're going to say. You can try to make things faster if you want to. You are in a rush and you make to think faster, or you can try to make people focus on what you are saying in that particular moment. it's important for you to understand that the voice is not a given. And it's also one very typical problem in that, because science is like a very formal situation, a lot of times we tend to maintain this kind of homogeneous droning voice, which is really good for making people fall asleep. But when you are trying to engage people, like, you have to think of your voice as your weapon for that. Then the nerves. This could be a whole topic about how to deal with nerves in this. I actually participated in some webinars about this. So I'm just going to say that it's very good to know where you tend to, how and when and why you tend to go nervous, and how to manage it. I know I'm just going tiptoeing over it, but it's like a very interesting topic. Afterwards, we can talk a little bit about techniques, etc. But I don't want to do this very fast. And timing. This is very related to what I was saying about the voice. Actually, one of the good things and one of the best things I think one person who's interested in science communication can do is look and study comedians, comics, sorry, to understand stand-up comics. People that work in stand-up, they basically are doing the same. It's them, their voice, and their body, nothing else, and trying to have people interested in what they are saying for 1 hour. So a lot of the things that they are going to do are the same tools that you're going to use, and they are professionals in that. So let's learn from the professionals. They understand how to do that. So as an exercise, I would recommend you like to go to Netflix or to go to any kind of YouTube or anything, look at some stand-up comedians and say, how are these people keeping interest for 1 hour? Why, when a teacher gives 1 hour class, people are drawn the sun out at 20 minutes, and these people are keeping people on the edge on their seats for 1 hour? A lot of the times is the timing of the use, the body language they use, how they engage the people. And this is really, really, really useful. And finally, pauses are important. A lot of the times when people talk, and this is way more obvious when it's in person, you have your presentation, super nice, it's 10 minutes, you finish it in 9:50, and you have practiced it, and people are not really following it. And sometimes it's because you need to let important messages breathe. When you're working, when you're saying your main point, or when you're explaining why something is important, sometimes it's good to slow down. Sometimes it's also good to make things go faster, but you need to work with this. Like, basically you don't want to make things boring. And finally, and this is one of the most important things, you need to believe that your story is interesting. You're the person that knows the most about what you're going to tell. Any topic can be fascinating, and if you work on it, probably you're the person who understands the best why that is fascinating. And it's good if you try to communicate to the people why it's interesting to you. So here are like an example of several people, several contexts, talking about their research. If you look at them, they are having fun. You can see how they like what they are doing. And if you manage to make people you manage to communicate this fun, communicate why this is interesting for you, half the battle is won. Most important of all, I know this can be very difficult, but it's important that you try to have a good time doing what you're doing. So thanks a lot. It's been a lot of things. I think I've gone a little bit too fast, but I hope that you have liked what I had to say. I'm going to stop sharing right now.
Well, thank you so much, Alvaro. I really, really enjoyed your presentation. I thought it was really brilliant. Thank you so much. I want people to pay attention to a couple of things that was going on there. I laughed out loud 2 times of your slides. I think the first one was about like this really serious presentation picture, and then he's like, the train goes choo choo, and I was like, yes. And also when the grandma knows how to do machine learning, I was like, that's funny. Anyway, but it's just, you know, like, this is not, you didn't say it, you didn't even point out the joke. It's just going on in the background. Like, the slides are there to supplement what you're trying to say and hone your point in. It's so important. I would also like people to pay attention to Alvaro's talk about like how you can develop your own style. I think that's a really important thing that we haven't talked about a lot before, but clearly we're all going to be very different, like when it comes to this, and we all have our own way to communicate. And there's also another element to it, which is cultural difference. We all have different styles just because we're doing it in China compared to doing it, let's say, in Spain or somewhere. It's just like there's going to be always, you need to kind of adopt a style that feels comfortable and nice for you. And I wonder what kind of style works well for people here. Maybe if somebody wants to share later, that would be really, really cool. And I also think like people should also take a look at what he was saying about studying stand-up comics. And also another group of people who are really good at this kind of things are the what do you call them? The people that do when you go on the stage and you improvise actors. Yeah. So like in the past, in our science communication training in the past, we had an improvising actor coming up to help out. And also we had like a stand-up comic coming up. And I think they're just really good because they can make anything sound interesting. They learn, like they're trying to understand how to get people's attention and so on. So that's really cool. I wonder if there's any questions out here. I see a lot of people thinking for the presentation.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
I totally agree with those. I wonder, I mean, like, okay, there's one, I encourage everybody here to take advantage of the fact that this is happening live. We're not watching a recording of Alvaro speaking. He's actually here. Is there anybody that would like to ask something?
Yeah, I see that there's actually like two questions, so I can.
Yeah.
If we want,
there was a question from Svetlana. How do you overcome nervousness? Maybe you start with that.
So there's like several tips and tricks for that. And you have to think, well, you have to try and test. This one is very silly, but it's really fast, and sometimes it's useful. It's very difficult to do it over like Zoom, but a lot of times there's like a physical and a psychological component of nervousness. So you can try this. This is very silly, but try like to contract all the muscles in your body for like 3 to 5 seconds. Like try like to like when you do like this, but like to contract and then relax. Basically, you're forcing your body, like you're tiring your muscles, so I'm forcing them to relax at the end. Like if you do this like 2 or 3 times, obviously the mental part is not going to work, but like the physical part, sometimes like you're getting nervous, you're sweating, etc. This thing about like contracting everything and then relaxing sometimes can be useful for that. Don't overthinking like the presentation. It's also good. Once I remember that I was had to do like one presentation, not for science communication, but for a grant. And I asked for the HR of my center, any recommendation? Because, you know, there were some politicians there, etc. And they said, you should try to practice it 100 times. I was like, oh, this is useless. It's not how many times I practice. It's like if things are good. And there's always has to be some room for improvement. Like if you want things go exactly as planned, it's way easier that you have like a more or less points that you want to go over, and then you allow yourself to breathe a little bit. Like you don't have to think about the presentation having to go in this particular way. There's always going to be room for like movement, and you are not making a mistake if you forget one point. And that's one very important thing. If you forget something, even if it's like a 10 minutes presentation, just go ahead. Like you're the only one that knows that has forgotten that. So a lot of the mistakes are in your head. So yeah, so these kind of things. The point of this is like it's a really, really good presentation, and it's really one of the enemies. but from this we could be speaking like a lot.
Yeah. And maybe I can add a little bit here. I was just thinking to myself, so I do presentations maybe 40, 50 times a year. And one thing I just want everybody to know is that you will never get rid of nervousness. You're always going to be nervous. It's just part of it. It's totally normal. And sometimes it's just a question of just like embracing it. It's just kind of, you know, like when you feel like these days, if I'm going onto a stage in front of people and I feel the nervousness, I just get excited. That's like fun. I know that's maybe not very useful for everybody, but just like try to think about it in a different way. This is just like means that you're doing something interesting and something exciting. And I think the second thing that also helped me is that people never notice when like they don't pay attention to the things that you think that they're paying attention to. So for example, earlier my chair broke down and I spilled coffee all over myself right in the middle of speaking to you guys. And I was like, it was not at all nerve-wracking for me, because I was just thinking, this, if anything, it just made the presentation more interesting, honestly, because nobody out there is like, oh my God, he's like spilling coffee all everywhere. Nobody's worried about that. And I don't worry about that people are worried about that. It's totally fine. And I think the third thing also is that then it's just about like exposure, how many times you do something. I think the biggest issue for people and why people are afraid of public speaking is because they just don't do it a lot. And if you have only done it 2 or 3 times in your life, how can you be good with this? You just need a little bit experience with them. Okay, there was a question from Ulu. How long do you think a good presentation can be, should be?
The thing is that many times you don't have the benefit of the choice. Like they will tell you how long the presentation needs to be, and then you have to go from there. But you need to think that humans have like unless we are super concentrated, we are unable to maintain like a steady level of concentration across time. So you need to design things with this in mind. You need like, this is like, sometimes you need like to catch people again. It's like, okay, go again inside of the ride. So for example, for like a 1 hour talk, that's for me is one of the most difficult, because you're going to lose people more or less twice. One around like the 20-minute mark and another about the 40-45-minute mark. Like there's a huge variation, but from my way, 10-20 minutes, it's easy for people to follow you. More than 20 minutes, they need to be interested, or you need to make an effort in the middle of going back, as I was saying, put something interesting, put a video, put something there. So it's not how long you make it, is that if you make it longer, you need to put like points so people can jump inside the topic again, even if they have lost a little bit. There's also, there's one very interesting from Florian and very difficult to answer, but there's one before from Natsira. So maybe I'm going to try to answer this and then the one from Florian. Hello?
Yeah, I saw there was a question for Paolo first, because he's like an earlier question.
Sorry.
Yeah, he's a professor in a Chinese university. I also see that he has camera on. Maybe Paolo, you would just like to ask yourself, or do you want me to read it?
Okay, I could ask online. Could you hear me?
Yes, yeah. I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm a professor in a Chinese university. Now I am fortunately have an opportunity in this year I think in the September I will go abroad, and now I got connecting with the foreigner tutor professors. But now I have 3 questions. One, because I read some really good advertise on the Auroras from the WeChat and website, and I write the cover letter. I introduce myself, but after 1 week, 2 weeks, there's nothing reply. So because I'm Chinese, I have the questions. If I send another time about my cover letter, about my CV, about my research proposal, is it applied for the foreigners? It's not boring because I send it too much times. So I wonder this one. There's the question 1. The question 2, because I publish some papers, but all in my mother language, in Chinese, in Korean, not in a foreign language. So I wonder, may I translate all my published papers into another language, or only a title, only a abstract, or which kind of presentation is good for the foreigner tutors? And number three, I know there's a lot of good opportunity on the Aurora's on the website, and I wonder now if I just presentation on my document, I just waiting for the reply from the email, or I have to write an email, get the communication with the professor of that university is better. Which way is better? So there's the three questions.
Yeah.
So first of all, just wanted to mention that what I'm going to say is my opinion, and that I'm not a very expert on this. I think these questions on the chat for that Haldor has mentioned would be maybe a better place, and like people may know more about this. But just going very fast, it's normal, and I don't think it's unpolite to if some advisor has not replied, to write them again. But if you write them to at the most 3 times and they don't reply, they are not going to reply.
3 times. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, 3 times will be the limit. 2 times is twice is the most used, is the most normal. If all your papers are in Chinese, at least the abstract or something, I think it's going to be interesting, and it's also show some commitment with the people, and it's going to be easier for them to understand. The third one, yeah, normally you wait for the professor's reply. Like if you write to them and then you write again and write again and write again, you're going to discourage the person for writing it back. It's better if you wait 1 week or so. If they don't,
1 week, 2 weeks.
I would like, yeah, 1 week, 2 weeks. More than that, they may forget. I saw this, maybe it has gone into, because sometimes it's true that you receive 40 minutes a day and then you forget, but not 20 hours afterwards. Your people, there's like you need to let it breathe.
Yeah, you don't want to be bothering them too much. We will have a trainer next week who's going to be talking about this sort of interview thing, and I think he is actually might have some more experience with this as well, because like how to write in and so on. And even the third training that we'll have about the getting published in a journal, they might also be pretty good with this as well, like understanding, like for example, how to send written communications and other things like that. So we can maybe try to ask them again next week and the week after about this. How do you should like communicate in the last one to people that are advertising? Yeah, normally they're going to be receiving hundreds of applicants possibly, and you don't want to be the one that is bothering them. I get that, but I also think it's smart, even before you send your original application, is to figure out who is this person, and is there any way? I mean, like I just know it from my own life and experiences. So even before I try to apply for anything, I always try to send them an email first before I apply, where I say before I applied, by the way, I will be like, hey, and whatever, I like what you're doing and understanding what you do. Just like that's like the first, like this has worked really well for me in my field. But what you don't want to do is that after you send something, you don't want to be bothering people, you don't want to be like sending. And this also I know from my personal experience, when people keep, like somebody sent me an email and I'm so busy I cannot answer it, and then they send me an email again, it just makes me feel bad. And now I connect you with something I don't like anymore, and that's not where you want to be either. So it's a tricky thing. We can maybe try to discuss this a little bit in our later webinars as well. Thank you for your question, Paulo.
Yeah, thanks very much.
And I saw that we have more questions here.
Yes, the next one I think was from Natsira. I hope I'm pronouncing it well, about how to use poses. Once again, this is not like a closed topic. This is how I would use them. And there's many. This is more about theatrics. So the people, we are laymen on theatrics that we are trying to learn a little bit about this. But for me, poses mostly are used for 2 things: creating expectation, and what they discovered was that, and then people, okay, what was, or like for letting things sink in. You say something very important, you say something very meaningful, and you don't want to do, and this is what changed my life. Anyway, next point is that you have lost there. Like if you say, like, I'm just giving an example, and this is what changed my life. You need to let it breathe a little bit for making people realize, oh, it changed his life. Like creating expectation, letting things sink in. That's for me like the most two important things. So like using pauses, like it's letting things breathe. I don't know if you want to add something, Haldor.
No, no, this is great. I was just, because we allowed Paolo to speak. If anybody else wants to ask directly, you can maybe raise your hand. There's a way to raise hand. That's maybe, otherwise I'm going to be reading your questions. There's another question from Florian.
That one is very interesting. That one is very,
what do you
very
think about that? Maybe I'll read it first. How much simplification should be done in maximum? For example, when it comes to Florian's daughter, who is 6 years, when she asked the question, she was asking something that required him to explain quantum mechanics. So of course, what he had to do was to explain it very shallow way. And then she told her, I will explain it better later in a couple of years. But what do you think? What do you think is the best way to handle this?
There is a very interesting topic about this. Literally, this is something called lies for children. Like that exists like a topic in communication and teaching. Lies for children refers to simplifying a topic, introducing something that maybe factually lies, but it makes it easier to understand. And there's like a great video from Kurzegast, which is like a YouTube communication channel, which is literally called Lies for Children, that goes into that. And I really recommend to Florian to go to watch that video, because it's 10 minutes and they're going to explain it way better than I'm going to explain here without preparation. There's no set limit in how much you want to simplify, because it's going to depend on your public. What you need to accept is that you are going to have to lie a little bit, because simplification is a kind of lie, because a lot of times there's an exception. So they're like, this is not exactly how it works, but you have to simplify things. And this is the hardest thing to do, is what can you lie about, and what is like the fundamental truth that you never should change. And this is not like a closed topic. And I mean, like the question is super interesting, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to say until here. The only thing is that you can lie a little bit, and you are going to lie a little bit. When I say DNA is a threat and it literally behaves like a threat, well, kind of. Not literally. Literally, there is a figure of speech, but the people are not going to, I'm not defending my PhD. I'm like making people understand how the DNA works. So even if I'm lying a little bit, if the bigger message is communicated, you can use that. I don't know if this has helped a little bit Florian, or say, look, this has been useless for him, but that would be, I can write afterwards like the video that goes into that. Very interesting, and I think you may like it.
So we have at least 3 more questions. I'm going to first read IF's questions, and then I'm going to allow Xinyu Wang and Adrique to ask their own question. But first with IF, because he was before them, what do you consider when choosing a topic or issue to present? Do you want to do you pick your own research or something else?
This is, you need to know what you're talking about. That's the point. Not necessarily has to be your research, but it goes a lot with what I said before. Simplifying things is one of the most difficult things that are, because you need to know very well a topic to be able to cut it down and make it still understandable. That's like in art. First, you need to understand how anatomy works, and then you can simplify anatomy. Like you need to understand how a topic works to see what thing is important and what thing is not that important, and so you focus on that topic. So obviously the easiest thing there is talk about what you know, and what you know more is what you work in. So not necessarily what you work in, but at least you need to have like a certain topic. I was invited to talk a little bit about biomedicine, revolution, cell therapy, etc. And I said, look, I can talk about sequencing because I know about this, but I'm not going to go into cellular therapy, because if I now spend like a couple of hours reading this, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to simplify things. It's useless. The people might as well spend that time reading what I'm going to read today. So I think that we have to know our limits.
Yeah. Xinyu Wang, would you like to open up your microphone?
Yeah, sure. Hi, thank you for sharing the excellent presentation with us. And I'm Xinyu. I'm currently a PhD candidate in University of Barcelona. And my question is, could you please give any suggestion about how to do a video recorded presentation? Well, my strength is when I'm facing some group of persons or people, I feel nervous but excited to present myself. But when I recording my presentation and face myself, I actually feel a bit nervous because last time I trying to participate in something like a conference, something like campaign, competition, stuff like that. And they asked us to record a video 3 minutes, and it cannot be edited. And I really have no idea how to use my strength and how to fix myself in the radio. I feel I cannot show my power and my passionate in such kind of presentation. And do you have any suggestion about this? Yeah, thank you.
That's a very good question, and one that I feel that I'm not knowledgeable enough to answer. And luckily for me, most of the communication I've done has been in person. So I have not a lot of experience in this. So I'm afraid that if I were to say you something, I will probably be lying. Probably Haldor is going to be better at answering this.
Well, I mean, I don't know why you say that, because I would recommend that Xinyu take a look at the recording of your Science Slam from December, because that was a non-edited video work that you did. It was a little bit longer than 3 minutes. It was 10 minutes, but there was a lot of tricks that you used there to show passion. One of the things that I thought was interesting that you did that some of the other ones did not is that you got a friend to record it, right? So she was able to move a little bit. So you were talking here, and then it was and then you moved over here and you moved it a little bit. And I thought immediately it was a very powerful thing, because when everybody else is just talking in front of a presentation and you're moving, it's already 10 times more dynamic. You know what I mean? And this is not even editing. This is just somebody holding a phone and then moving the phone a little bit. So I thought that was interesting. You also used the props in your Science Slam. And this is also something you could do in a video recording. You can lift up something, show off something. So I think I'm not gonna pretend I'm an expert, but I do recommend that Xinyu maybe take a look at the recording of the Science Slam. I thought it was pretty good demonstration what you can do with very limited video, just with a phone basically.
Yeah. I mean, but the point is that the person who did that was Esther, also a very good scientist, but she has a little bit more of background in video editing, etc. Yeah. I wish she was here, because she was the one who was trying to keep everything. But no, of course, one of the most boring things is close frame, no movement here. When somebody, you have to think all these TikTokers, Instagrammers, etc. Even when they are recording runs, a lot of times they are driving or they are walking. Why? Because people like movement. So if I was just walking around the room talking about this and showing stuff, it's already way more interesting. So yeah, camera, a little bit of camera movement and a little bit of this, but as Haldor has said, you need at least a friend for that, or a selfie stick, which is also something that could be interesting.
Find someone to help me record it, and the moving stuff would be very helpful, because previously I just recorded by myself and I looking at the camera and talking with myself. Yeah, so thank you very much.
It's one thing. Obviously, there's also other tricks and so on too that, but it's a really good question. Thank you so much, Xinyu. I see there's a question from Aderike. If she would like to unmute herself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry, I won't be able to open my camera, turn on my camera. No worries. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm a master's student and in molecular biotechnology. I do not have my own research yet, apart from my bachelor's thesis. But I wanted to start practicing, because I love writing. science writing / science communication. And sometimes I come up with ideas about what I know in molecular biotechnology, and I want to write about it, I want to talk about it, but I go online and I do my research, and I found out that a lot of people have actually done what I had in mind to do. So I'm finding it hard to get things to write on or to talk about, because I feel like there are a lot of people that have already done that. And so I don't know, because I don't have my own research here, like a new thing that I'm doing, how do I launch into this without doing what others have done? So I have problems with that.
What do you think, Alvaro?
So, I mean, that's an important point. Why does need to be said if there's already people that have said that? That's a perfectly valid question, and I would have like 2 points. One is that the target. So for example, let's suppose that I have one video of like 1 hour of CRISPR-Cas9, how does it work, what's going to be the future of it. It's super well done, super well edited, and it's amazing, but it's 1 hour. So maybe like, and it goes very deep into that. So maybe for somebody like a college student age that has the time to look at it, that's super nice. But maybe nobody has tried to tell this in 2 minutes, fast thing, simplified for somebody to understand. Oh, I want this in a bite-sized video, or I'm going to explain this to children. So it's not only the topic, but it's also how the topic is explained. So one exercise that you can do is, okay, and also can be a challenge for you is, this topic has been explained already in this way. How can I do the topic so it reaches other type of people or people with other type of interest? Another point is that for certain topics, there's also like the personal experience and your thoughts on that, no? So I'm just thinking about like aloud. But if I were to talk about, for example, cellular therapy and gene therapy, I also can go into what do I think about like the ethical implications of this, or what do I predict this is going to go. So the fact that somebody has talked already once about that doesn't mean that all avenues are explored or like all approaches have been tried, and there's always one way to face it. The thing is that you don't want to go in a path that has already been threaded. So you can go parallel to it, or you can go in a different path. But if something is already done in one way, don't repeat it, but you can try to give it your spin to it.
Okay. And do you think I can also like look into the limitations, but that would take further research on it, and maybe look for the limitations in the previous and then probably work on it. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, a lot of like communication in science is very futuristic, we're going to make everything, we're going to make people immortal. So if you say this is why we are not really never going to be immortal, that's also interesting per se.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No worries. So
there's a last question. Yeah. And so I invited people to ask the last question because it would probably be nice to wrap it up soon. But Alvina asks how to get simplification to convey our message to an audience comprising of people from different fields or approaches. So basically you're talking to people that are not in your own field. How do you decide how to simplify what you're trying to say? And how do you treat them like the same as we do for laymen?
Yes, that is one of these things that as with many other things, there's not a hard answer to. My way of thinking of this is the minimum common multiples, what we say. So basically, who is the person who knows the least? I'm going to be talking to that person because probably that's the person who is going to gain more knowledge about this. That doesn't mean that if I'm giving like a speech to 200 people and there's 199 doctors and one 10-year-old, obviously I'm going to talk like to the doctors, okay? So like, with certain like knowledge of what you're doing. But for example, a situation, you're working you're in a multidisciplinary research. For example, I do things that are between biology and physics, and I'm going to talk to a room in which there are 50 physics and 70 biologists. I'm going to simplify my biology because like the physics, and I'm going to simplify my physics. And if the biologists say, look, this is very basic, or the physicists say, look, the physics is very basic, like this part is not for you. Like you like, if you like to the biologists, maybe you can make them go from here to here, but for the physicists, you make them go from here to here. So it's always better to think about the people that know the least and talk to them. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Alvaro. So I think this has been pretty good so far. What I want to do now before we finish the day is that I want to share the QR code one more time for the WeChat group. So is that visible right now? Can you get a confirmation?
I'm going to scan it.
Yeah, so basically for people that want to join our rest of our webinars and are going for the certification and want to send in the video at the end, and or just want to join the community and the discussion and so on, you should definitely join the WeChat group. I'll be sending out my presentation in there later, and I will also share like links to recordings and other stuff in the WeChat group. And also I've had really good experience just discussing things there. So if people are inspired and have more questions and want to chat, I'm totally up for it. And this is the group to do it in. So that's really cool. And I hope I see a lot of you joining the WeChat group. I don't know if there's any last words that you want to add, Alvaro, or what is it?
It's been a great experience. I hope that I have not been too boring, because otherwise I would be selling very bad my presentation with that. I hope people have been able to enjoy, and more or less everything is understandable. And if there's like a take-home message, it's like think about what people know before you explain it to them. That would be it.
Yeah, no, you were definitely not boring. It was really great. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you so much for your great insights. I can really tell that people liked what you were saying and thought that they were learning something. I thought it was really well received, and we can also see it from the response and the questions at the end. I want to also just thank all the participants that came today. For joining us, and in particular all these great questions that we got at the end. This is not
they were really great. They were really great.
Yeah,
I'm really curious about the question that needed explaining quantum physics.
Yes, I would like to see how we went about that.
Yeah, how do you get there? Everything was great.
Yeah. But at that point, I think we can just like wrap it up today. And I hope to see everybody here that came here today again next week, Wednesday, again, 4 o'clock China time. So we will have our training on how to prepare for interviews with Dean Hogan. And I think this is also something that you can learn a lot from. And I see a lot of the participants today and a lot of the questions have to do with this sort of personal benefit you can get from being better at communication. And this is certainly one of those aspects that you can get really quickly, a lot of improvements, and also a lot of benefit really early on. So I encourage everybody to participate in that one as well. Thank you so much for coming today, and I'll see you all next Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'll be leaving the QR code for a little bit, just for those of you that want to scan it still.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Thank you. Let's see, we're down to 24. Wondering if anybody else want to scan, or I should just close it. Thank you very much. All right, guys, I think I'll just like stop sharing and finish the event. Again, thank you so much, Alvaro. We'll stay in touch. I'll give you better feedback later. I thought it was a really nice, well done presentation.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.